What's up, everybody? Doing power rankings here on Monday instead of where we normally do them on Tuesday. Just still have a lot going on around New Year's and the holiday season here. The Rams are double-digit favorites against the Falcons here tonight. I don't think most of you are going to complain about doing it here today. If we do see an upset, I'll tweet out a little update to the rankings or something. But without further ado, let's get started. If you could do me a huge favor, please do take a second to hit that like button down below. Make sure you subscribe to the channel as well. It really does help me out. And let's go ahead and get started. At the bottom, the very bottom tier, I'm going a step further. Instead of the booty tier, I'm calling this the absolute cheeks tier. And the Raiders, with what they put on the field on Sunday, if you can even call that an NFL team, deserve to be at the very bottom here. But they get what they deserve. Now we can get into evaluating Fernando Mendoza and asking if he's worth that number one overall pick. Just a little spoiler. I've done some film breakdowns on my Patreon if you want to go check that out. I got a lot more to see before I'm there with Mendoza. But at number 31, the New York Jets. It says a lot that I actually had to debate if they might be worse than the Raiders. The level that they've reached as this season has progressed or regressed, if you prefer that. Certainly more of an accurate description of this team. Aaron Glenn feels to be kind of losing this team, and I continue to just not see it with him as the head coach. It just reminds me so much of like Callahan in Tennessee last year, where you're heading into next season and it feels like everybody knows where this is headed. I think it's best to just rip the Band-Aid off. You have multiple first-round picks. Don't let a coach that you'll very likely end up letting go kind of have a say in those critical investments, and go get a better head coach candidate. Glenn hasn't shown it as a head coach, and frankly, as a candidate to begin with, I had my questions. But then at number 30, the Arizona Cardinals, who have just lost everything, whether it's football games, losing 12 of their last 13 games, football players, their starters are dropping like flies this season, and I think the effort is out the window as well. Then at number 29, the New York Giants, who do win the Tank Bowl or lose the Tank Bowl. Good to see Jackson Dart making some plays, build some momentum into the offseason, but I'm going to keep them in the bottom tier. Not all that impressed by a win over the Raiders. I will say, though, Abdul Carter is emerging as what was hyped up and expected of him, which is also great to see. Almost as big as finding that quarterback is finding that critical, impactful edge rusher through the draft like that. But let's go to the next tier, the booty tier. We do have 6 tiers here today. I've got the Washington Commanders here. Just a tough team to kind of nail down right now down the stretch. They've had some competitive efforts against teams like Denver and Philadelphia when they do want to show up. But at the same time, we know the talent deficiencies that this team is out there working with Josh Johnson at quarterback of all people. Then at number 27, the Cleveland Browns, who get a win this week against the Steelers on the heels of that defense that, as we know, seemingly once a month as they get their 4th win in a 4-month season, more or less. That defense is going to get them some wins, and that's what happened this week. Myles Garrett, hoping he can go get that sack record this week. It's a bummer he couldn't get it in the 16-game season, because all the other guys he's passing up did it in 16 or less. But at number 26, the Kansas City Chiefs at 6-10 on the season. It is going to be so weird to see the Chiefs picking inside the top 10 at this point. It feels like a lock, right? I'm just kind of eyeballing all the records. But yeah, Chris Oladokun was running around making some stuff happen. The defense is still trying. This team can be in some games. I guess you can respect some of the effort on the defensive side of the ball against Denver on Christmas night. But I don't really have a whole lot left to say about Kansas City here. Then we go to the Tennessee Titans at number 25. They climb up another spot in the rankings here. And by the way, I'm going off of the power rankings that I did tweet out last week. So some of you guys might be wondering where these pluses and minuses are coming from if you're looking back at the week 15 power rankings. I was out of town last Monday celebrating the holidays down in Chicago. So That's why we didn't have a video last week. But anyway, the Tennessee Titans, I feel like are playing much more like the team you hoped to see them be this year. Cam Ward certainly feels like a QB with the flashes to build around, and you're getting more consistent down-to-down play from him, which is excellent. Limiting turnovers, which is excellent. Granted, he did get away with a few, if we're being honest about the tape against New Orleans, but doesn't change what I said. He's playing much better ball and getting better as the season goes forward, which is obviously what the biggest focus of this Titans season was all about. And they're hanging in some games, man. Jeffrey Simmons has really cemented an all-pro caliber season, and I would say taking a leap as an overall football player. We've been kind of waiting for him to be one of those kind of tier 1 defensive tackles. I think he's really made that leap this year, if you're being honest about it. So it's not all bad for Tennessee. Hopefully they're making some appeals to some of the top head coach candidates this cycle, because that list falls off pretty quick. It's not the best and longest list of quality head coach candidates this year. All right, before we go to our next tier here, I do want to thank the sponsor for today's Power Rankings, my friends over at SeatGeek. For most of you, whether it's one more Week 18 game or one final home playoff game, you've only got 1 week left to go show your support for your NFL team here in person. Go catch a football game, have some fun, and with my promo code TFG10, you can save up to $20 on that ticket purchase and support my channel in the process. If it's not an NFL game, they got you covered for concerts. We've got basketball and hockey season starting to ramp up as well. SeatGeek has got you covered with the best prices, the best user interface. They are the number 1 ticketing app out there, and for good reason. So that's code TFG10 when you check out. You'll save up to $20 and support this channel in the process. But let's go ahead and move forward with the power rankings. So this is going to be the Frisky tier. Definitely some teams that are I guess, out but not down, to flip that term on its head. We do have the Atlanta Falcons here at number 24. They obviously play here tonight, like I said. If they do pull the upset, I will tweet out some form of an update to the rankings, but I expect, probably around where that spread is. I think the offense will get theirs with Bijan and Drake London, hopefully a little bit healthier. But the Rams are a really good team, so I'm anticipating that this team falls to 6-10. They do have a chance to do a really funny thing, and if they win out and the Bucs beat the Panthers, that would create a 3-way tie in the NFC slouch, in which the Panthers would actually emerge victorious there. But yeah, this team has a lot of issues and a long offseason of difficult decisions ahead. Then at number 23, the Miami Dolphins. They get a win this week. They upset the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, showing some life. Quinn Ewers, I laughed about them going to him, and I even wanted to see Zach Wilson, and a part of me still does, if I'm being honest. But credit where credit's due. Quinn Ewers has looked more competent than I expected. Devon Achane continues to just be incredible. And the defense played their ass off this week, bouncing back from an embarrassment against the Bengals the week before. This team continues to, there's been several different landmarks in the season where you think that the whole soft Mike McDaniel, no culture Dolphins are going to show up, and they come out with kind of a toughness-based performance. So I think there's still some encouraging signs in that regard. And since our last power rankings, they have benched Tua as well, finally, thank God. So, offseason's going to be interesting in terms of who their QB is going to be. But then at number 22, the Dallas Cowboys, who I thought maybe were mailing it in after their season was eliminated, but they bounced back with a win over Washington this week. Offense looking good until they slowed down a little bit. But hey, they get a win. They climb to 7-8-1 and a chance to finish with a true 500 record in a 17-game season. It's not easy to do that. Then we have the New Orleans Saints at number 21. They actually lose a spot here because there's another team climbing up even higher, but it's not to take anything away from the Saints, man. The fact that they are 21 in my power rankings based on where I thought this team would be this season, I thought they would for sure be down there with teams like the Raiders and the Jets, and it's just not the case. Kellen Moore has done an incredible coaching job. Tyler Shuck is looking like a franchise quarterback for the Saints, and to find that with the 40th pick in the draft, incredible move all around. The defense is playing, maybe not so much this week, but overall they're also impressing me and playing better and harder under Brandon Staley than I expected. There's just been so many green lights for this team. You got to walk away encouraged about the future in New Orleans. Then at number 20, the Indianapolis Colts, who do drop yet another one here. That is 6 straight, making them good for 1-7 in their last 8 games, or 2-9, 2-8 in their last 9 games. It's just been the biggest fall from grace you could have possibly imagined. Like, even if you were banking on regression from this team after their hot start, to see them drop this hard was hard to see coming, especially after they trade a couple of first-round picks for Sauce Gardner. It's just the Colts are in a tough spot, man. The quarterback you're hoping is going to be your starter next year has got to bounce back from an Achilles tear. It just sucks, man. I do just feel terrible for Colts fans. I always say it's one type of terrible pain if you're like a Jets or a Browns fan and your team just always sucks, and I get that. It's a different type of pain. Whether it's better or worse, you can debate that, but it is a different type of pain when you have true, genuine hope, and then it gets ripped out of you like that. And that just sucks if you're a Colts fan. It has at least been tempered with the enjoyment of watching Phillip Rivers play football again, but that is really just kind of dropping some whipped cream and sprinkles on top of a pile of shit that the second half of this season has been, for being honest about it. But let's go to our next tier here. And when I tweeted out the power rankings last week without making a video on it, I kind of just separated the teams that still have playoff life and the teams that were eliminated. Seeing some teams down the board a little bit that are eliminated from the playoffs playing hard and showing some true, genuine life down the stretch here. Putting this list together, I was like, why should I rank, for example, a 7-9 Bucs team who's going to be our number 19 team here? Why should I rank them over teams that I think are just better teams right now, just because their division sucks, or the fact that they are lucky enough to still have a chance to make the playoffs? So I'm not going to do that this week. I'm going to put some non-playoff teams in here in this third tier, really to signal like, hey, they didn't make the playoffs, but they are better than some other teams that will, I think. I mean, that is obviously going to start here with the Tampa Bay Bucs, who fall to 7-9 with a loss against the Dolphins. And I was dangerously close to just putting them in the Frisky tier, man. I still think there is a glimmer of hope in there, right, for what this team was at the start of the season. But they week after week after week keep failing to capture that magic. And this really does all come back to Baker Mayfield, right? Like there's some issues with the defense. I think there's some legitimate criticisms of Todd Bowles. The offensive line has not played, I think, up to their capabilities. I know they've had some injuries there, but they just haven't been winning one-on-one like you expect and picking up stunts like you expect. But that's all not like insurmountable or issues that so many other teams don't deal with. Baker's just playing very, very bad football right now. Like, not even just average. Like, he went from an MVP candidate in the first 8 weeks of the season to he is now back, I think, to like the quarterback that was benched and released in Carolina, the one that the Browns moved on from. He has completely lost that confidence and that magic. You're seeing ugly turnovers, miscommunications, and just constant misfires with his accuracy. And I think also just the poise in the pocket isn't what you want it to be. He has regressed fully, and that's obviously not what you want to see for Tampa. You are essentially holding on to a prayer here that he can get that back in the snap of a finger in what is now a shorter week, as this team's going to play Saturday night for the division, unless, of course, Atlanta goes on some miracle run here. But it's bad in Tampa, and I certainly think everybody asking for them to move on to a new head coach, if they do fall short of the playoffs, and even if they do make the playoffs, I think it's justified, man. This team and this locker room is pretty damn lost right now. So they fall 3 in the rankings here. And then not too much better for the Pittsburgh Steelers, man, after a feel-good week 16 against Detroit. They come around with a chance to clinch the playoffs by beating the Cleveland Browns. And they can't do it. And on top of all of this is the stupidity of DK Metcalf going at it with a fan. I'm not going to get into what was said or what wasn't said. The problem is DK Metcalf going over there to begin with. Just ridiculous to see that happen, and then to see what the impact of his loss meant for this team. Without DK Metcalf, he was the only explosiveness they had. You're forcing targets to Marquez Valdes-Scantling, and we know what's going to happen there. But even the fact that they get down in the red zone with a chance to win the game somehow, like it felt like it was over after they were stopped at the 2-minute warning, and then they still found a way to get back to the goal line. 3 straight targets to Marquez Valdes-Scantling to win the game at the goal line. That's number one, that's not his game. And I know that Darnell Washington also got hurt in this game. You still have Adam Thielen and Pat Freiermuth are much better options than MVS in that area, but Aaron Rodgers just can't freaking help himself. He has to go to his guy, and this has been the crippling weakness of Aaron Rodgers really since he lost that core group of players, Jordy Nelson and Greg Jennings and Devontae as an up-and-coming part of that. It's been years of this with Aaron Rodgers, where I think his biggest frustrations are his inability to just play within a scheme and just force-feed guys. I think generally speaking this year it hasn't been that bad, but those issues brought themselves to the forefront in the worst of times. Obviously, the defense gave them a chance to win this week, but goodness, man, I don't think you feel very good coming out of that one when now you see what the Ravens did, forcing a win or go home situation. It's not looking good for Pittsburgh, man. Maybe they pull it off. They are the home team, but even if they get in, the upside of this team is so limited. I would feel much better about them getting DK Metcalf back, because I do think he is the core engine of their offense for sure. And Darnell Washington going down with that broken arm certainly doesn't help them in the power ranking series. A big part of what they do, literally and figuratively, but very underrated contributor. So bad week for Pittsburgh, -4. Then we have the Cincinnati Bengals at number 17. Like I said, some of these teams showing some life and creating hope for next season. I think that's really what's happening here in Cincinnati. I think Joe Burrow comes out with that press conference like, I just want to have fun playing football again. Well, he's doing it, man. And I think very quickly putting to bed the idea that, Joe Burrow is going to force his way out of here. I think they're creating that energy that is reminding everybody in that building, like, look, when Joe's healthy and you got Jamar and you got T. Higgins, they just have to make some improvements with the defense and not give up 30 points every week, which they haven't. And they're going to be able to create fireworks and win a lot of football games. If they had to go up against a team like Pittsburgh right now, I would have to pick the Bengals to win that one. Likewise against Tampa. They're obviously not going to make the playoffs, but they're going to climb up here into this third tier. Likewise with the Minnesota Vikings, who get to 8-8, and with the Packers likely going to be sitting everybody, they have a chance to get to a winning record this season, despite how everything started. We'll see if J.J. McCarthy's able to play. That was kind of a tough one for me in terms of where to rank the Vikings. I think if JJ's played better football, he's looked more just competent in this second half of the year since he came back from the injury. If you could guarantee me he's going to play this week, I think I would rank them over the Lions, who I still haven't ranked yet. And I know that the Lions beat the Vikings with Max Brosmer. A lot of turnovers for the Lions in that game. But what I'm getting at here is if it's Max Brosmer again this week, and this is a lot of semantics for a Week 18 power rankings when this team can't make the playoffs, but man, it's been tough to watch the Max Brosmer experience. So if it is Brosmer again, I don't even know if 16 is justified. So it's hard to know, like with the quarterback play. But regardless, man, this defense with Brian Flores, it's just incredible. What they're doing out there. So many games they're winning on the heels of their defense, the way that they scheme this thing up and elevate their players. You've got Dallas Turner as well, really breaking through. Van Ginkel continues to be a beast. It just blows my mind how we got to this point where it's assumed that Brian Flores just isn't going to get a head coaching offer, when in my mind, he's a top 10 to 15 head coach in the NFL and honestly wasn't that far off that mark in Miami. I think he gets way too much crap for what he accomplished in Miami with young Tua and an incapable offense. Yes, there were criticisms that he couldn't quite find the right offensive coordinator, but I think time has told the true story on who Tua is as a quarterback. And those were like playoff teams with really good defenses that played way above their pay grade. The writing was on the wall that Brian Flores was this good when he was in Miami. So it does blow my mind that once, one random day, 70-year-old Bill Belichick texts the wrong texts Brian Flores instead of Brian Dable. It tips Flores off to a faulty Rooney Rule interview. You get a lawsuit, and now you're left with one of the most talented, certainly defensive coaches in the league and a very talented head coach candidate just not getting in the mix. It's one of the more underrated, wild narratives in the NFL, and the Vikings are the absolute benefactor of all of it. You could make a very strong case, and I've said this before, that the Vikings have 2 top 10 head coaches in their own building. But let's go to our next team here, the Carolina Panthers. They're going to stay put at 15. They have, obviously, that chance to win the division this week. They are underdogs in Tampa Bay, 3-point underdogs, basically saying these teams are evenly matched. And I don't think it's crazy. Obviously, I have these teams inside the same tier. Disappointing how the offense played against a remarkable Seahawks defense. Overall, though, that defense did play hard in that game against Seattle and gave them a chance. J.C. Horn, if they do lose this game to Tampa, it's going to take a long time to forgive J.C. Horn for his performance. A drop pick, one face mask that went uncalled, and then on a 3rd and 23, when the stadium was screaming, I don't think we've heard that Bank of America Stadium screaming like that since the Cam Newton MVP season. They get a 3rd and 23 stop in a 1-score game, I think early in the 4th quarter or late in the 3rd. The offense had just put their only drive together, and J.C. Horn just tackles JSN by the face mask with like 15 yards to go for the first down. Just given the stakes and the pivot point of a team's season, arguably the worst penalty, and you factor in how just stupid of a penalty it was. It did not have to happen. This wasn't some bang pass interference or something down the field. You can make a case that was the signature boneheaded worst mistake of a player this year. Reminds me a little bit of like Jonathan Taylor fumbling, dropping the ball at the inches line for Denver last year, which was costly for them. Or for Indianapolis in Denver, rather, obviously. But we'll see what happens this week. Even if they get in, I mean, they might be double-digit favorites against the 5 seed, whoever it ends up being. I still would love it for the city of Charlotte, and I plan on being there for that playoff game if they do make it, which would be incredible, but we'll see what happens. Let's go to the Detroit Lions at number 14 here. Tough team to rank. They lose to the Vikings this week. They lost to the Steelers last week. Sloppy game this week against Minnesota. A ton of turnovers. I still think any given Sunday, Detroit could go toe-to-toe with anybody, right? Like if they played any number of the teams inside the top 10, I still think it's a tough game that Detroit has a chance. Obviously on the heels of a sloppy performance against a lesser opponent in Minnesota, it's tough to look at this 14 rank and truly believe in it. But the talent is there. At the end of the day, though, the narrative with Detroit is they've got work to do, dude. They have some critical weaknesses on this team. The interior of the offensive line, you need development from some of these young guys, but I do think you need to address it, whether it's through the draft or free agency. Having poor drop back pass pro with Jared Goff, it's just the chemistry just doesn't work there. Goff needs pass protection to play at his best level. And look, I've seen people say, should the Lions move on from Jared Goff? Stop it. Like the overreactions to trying to move on from some of these quarterbacks, it's we gotta just slow things down here, guys. Number one, no, they're not moving on. They're not even thinking about moving on from Jared Goff, who is playing well with a year where the pass pro has not lived up to standards. But also, what else are they going to do? What's your plan? Are you going to go sign Jacoby Brissett or draft Lenoris Sellers at the end of the first round. Like, what are we talking about here? No, they're not moving on from Jared Goff. But they do have work to do with the offensive line, and I think they just have to look in the mirror defensively. I understand you want to say the safeties are injured, you've gotten corners banged up, the secondary's banged up, and you want to just say that's the only reason the defense has struggled. And look, the defense gave it their all this week against Max Brosmer, right? But overall, the defense has really struggled this year. There's been so many weeks where they're putting up 25, 30 points, and it's just not enough. I think they really need to look in the mirror with their defensive identity. They lean into this Dan Campbell mentality, not just in how they play, but in the schemes that they play, right? On both sides of the ball. And that applies to the defense, where they love cover one. They love to blitz and, play that physical in-your-face style of defense. Well, you're just kind of getting cooked by it, right? And it's just hard to live in that world when, they aren't picking high in the draft to find premium cornerback talent. Like it is like Terrion Arnold was there in the 20s for a reason, right? Like he's a 4.5 speed 40 guy. He's not a freak athlete. DJ Reed at 29 years old or whatever he was, available in free agency for a relatively affordable contract for a reason. Obviously, Detroit is paying these superstars now. Their wiggle room to have this super powered roster from top to bottom and have this incredible secondary. And yeah, their safeties are great, but that doesn't have that much to do with their cover one man-to-man capabilities. What I'm saying here is, look at the rest of the league. Like, so many of the teams are in this zone-heavy world, the match, split safety, quarters, quarter, half style stuff, because the reality is it's just really hard to build a secondary with a bunch of guys that can play man-to-man and live in that world. It's incredibly challenging to be that type of defense. And they have just, I know they've kind of thrown some shit at the wall to see what sticks, but I don't think the coaching infrastructure are the best coaches, frankly, to coach a lot of zone coverage. And even then, they're still top 3 in cover one called. So even if they're trying to mix things up a little bit, it's not to the degree that other teams have leaned into zone-heavy defenses. And they end up throwing these guys out on an island, by the way, with a GM that has, for some reason, ignored their pass rush outside of Aiden Hutchinson and just assumed everything was going to be good. That's also something that'll help you play more cover one. They have to change their approach, whether it's with the style of players they're drafting, the scheme that they're playing. Because the thing is, they don't need an elite defense in Detroit. They don't. They just need to hold teams under 24, patch up the interior of the offensive line a little bit, and they'll be just fine. But I do wonder if that's going to happen after this has been a couple of really bad off seasons for Detroit that have been kind of left undiscussed. So big offseason coming for Detroit, as they obviously are not going to be competing for the Super Bowl this year. But then at number 13, this is where I'm going to have the Green Bay Packers in the Pretenders tier here. You just can't be walking ass backwards into the playoffs like this. It just, I mean, so many of these other teams are playing their best football here in late December and getting healthy late in December. And it's just not the case in either department for Green Bay. And I know a couple weeks ago they went into Chicago and played their ass off. But number one, the reason they lost that game is something that has plagued this team for over a decade. Special teams. They've lost multiple games this season. The Cowboys tie was due to special teams. The Browns game, the Browns loss was due to special teams. Their inability to get better in that department, it's, special teams is one of those things that it's difficult to predict and look at a team and be like, oh, they're going to struggle because of their special teams, but there's no denying that special teams can easily swing a game when you do have bad special teams in an individual game. And when you are Green Bay, who has consistently had the worst special teams, certainly for the last 3 years, but I would say over the course of the last decade, maybe the Chargers are the only other team you could consider with a worse special teams unit over the course of a decade. It's a huge freaking problem, and their inability to get that fixed is laughable. It is embarrassing. There's a large sum of adjectives you could use to describe that. So that cost them the Bears game in a game where they did play hard and the defense did show effort. And then I think the other side of that is you saw a team that was demoralized from that demoralizing defeat against Chicago. And not just demoralized, But in a game against Baltimore, in what for them was a playoff feel, they just beat the crap out of this very undersized, under-talented defensive front for Green Bay that is just flooded with Brian Gutekunst mistakes, man. You've got Quay Walker still out there at linebacker. He's horrible. And with Micah Parsons now injured, like maybe the one good thing Brian Gutekunst did this offseason was going to get Micah Parsons. That has covered up so many of these issues. I did say it at the time, like, there should be a follow-up move. Like, that just makes sense, right? You trade away Kenny Clark, who's kind of the only defensive tackle there. When you look at that roster, it's all pass rush specialists and undersized hybrid guys. You trade away your one true, like, nose tackle capable player. You also lost to TJ Slayton in free agency, and they did nothing. Like, literally nothing. They just hung their hat on Warren Brinson, a 6th-round pick, and Nazir Stackhouse, an undrafted pickup out of Georgia. Because Brian Gutekunst thinks Georgia defenders can do no wrong. The fact that there was no follow-up move to go, it didn't have to be anything crazy, but go make a phone call for a vet or see who's out there in free agency. There was none of that. Just yet another example of, a one step forward, or in the case of acquiring Micah Parsons, I guess you could say like 6 steps forward. But it's always one good move followed up by an extremely questionable move that the good GMs just don't screw up. So just issues in Green Bay, man. Obviously, Jordan Love is in concussion protocol as well. But that hasn't really impacted this team with the way that Malik Willis is balling right now. I mean, that's the one fun thing about this team is just for Malik Willis's sake, that dude has made himself generational wealth these last 2 weeks. Like, just so happy for him and the way that he's worked at it and developed as a player. I'm excited, I think, as a lock at this point to see him start for a team next year. There's so many teams that could use his services. So that's exciting. But look, Green Bay's in the playoffs, and maybe they can bring that energy in a wild card matchup or whatever, and kind of play defense like they did in Chicago a week ago. That would be the hope. But with all the injuries, so many holes on this roster, on the interior of the D-line and in the secondary. I mean, don't even get me started on the fact that cornerback room was entirely ignored in this draft, while Gutekunst is drafting Savion Williams in the 3rd round. Maybe they play hard in a wild card game and squeak one out, but when I'm making these tiers, for example, the top 2 tiers are teams that I could actually see winning a Super Bowl in a year where this thing's wide open. Right now, with Green Bay stumbling into the playoffs, I would be flabbergasted if they put together 3 straight consistent games, don't screw things up on special teams in any of those games, and get through the playoffs. So I've got them dropping to the Pretenders tier at 9-6-1 here. And then the Baltimore Ravens, they're interesting, right? Like, that was by far their best game of the season. Yet inside that game, their defense still got lit up by Malik Willis. It took him coming out of the game and a Bo Melton dropping a pass that gets popped up in the air and intercepted. It takes that to start getting some defensive stops. So I think there's still some serious worries about their lack of pass rush, the overall defense. But to see Derrick Henry putting the team on his back like that and the offensive line playing well, I think there is something to be said, and the broadcast did a good job highlighting this, that they haven't wanted to run the ball with Lamar Jackson, and their designed QB run game is such a big booster to their run game. I don't think it's a coincidence that they've ran the ball better when Tyler Huntley's been the starter, just because Lamar's been hurt and they don't want to go that route with him and get him even more exposed to injuries. So we'll see who's starting this week against Pittsburgh, but I don't know that it makes that big of a difference between like what I just said about the run game better being with Tyler Huntley or a injured like 80% Lamar Jackson. I don't know how much of a difference that really makes from a power rankings perspective, but at the end of the day, an impressive back against the wall ass kicking by the Baltimore Ravens. Now I think favored against Pittsburgh, a chance to get into the playoffs, but I just kind of like Green Bay. I mean, obviously Baltimore won that game and is coming off a win and all that. But I still think Baltimore would be, to stick with that term, kind of walking ass backwards into the playoffs with too many issues to overcome to legitimately compete for a Super Bowl. But let's go to this next year. And like I said, this year's NFL is wide open. I am going to go back to the titling of these tiers as more flawed playoff teams in tier 2 and less flawed playoff teams in tier 1. But with this year's NFL so wide open, I can see some craziness, right? And with our first team in this tier 2, the LA Chargers, I would say, obviously ranking at the bottom of these top teams, they're a little bit harder for me to see going on a run because their offensive line issues are just so hard to overcome. But with the way Justin Herbert is playing, and he has very nicely responded from a mid-season skid. Not that he was bad mid-season, but he was at an MVP level for like the first month, slowed down, and then I think he's kind of back to that like MVP level. What he did to try to give this team a chance against Houston almost got them back in this game. If not for a pretty iffy, poorly timed penalty, which to be fair was a bit of a makeup call for a questionable call on the other end of things earlier. So I'm not trying to make it about the refs. I'm just saying, like, very easily could have been a situation where Herbert leads this incredible comeback effort. I thought he was really impressive in this game. And I think you do have to tip your cap to the Chargers defense as well. I don't like the talent base on that team, but dude, Jesse Minter is just elevating that team to spectacular levels. So I will put them in this tier. I think they're almost in a subcategory, if you're being honest about it. Like, I would be very surprised if this team was able to go on a run and compete with the rest of these other Super Bowl contenders in a 4-game stretch now that they're not going to get the 1 seed. But they're also a category above like the Packers and Ravens, if that makes sense. But gonna have them here at number 11. And then we have at number 10, the Chicago Bears. This was the week where you really felt what my worry on the Bears has been this year reveal its ugly head, and that is this defense. And it was crazy. Like, it even happened in a game that started with a pick 6. But the lack of a pass rush, the secondary just doesn't have it right now. I know Kevin Byard, for example, has been like really opportunistic to create some picks, but when you take the picks away from Kevin Byard, like there's a lot of there's just a lack of speed and range on the back end, and some of those big plays, you felt that against the Niners this week. So it's just tough to win football games, giving up 42 points and Brock Purdy looking like peak Patrick Mahomes in this game against your defense. But at the same time, Caleb Williams, it feels like every week there's another level kind of unlocked with him. You could make a very strong case this was his best performance, and that's coming off of, a remarkable comeback effort against Green Bay, where he struggled earlier in that game against Green Bay, but really showed his elite potential with that comeback effort. So with him cooking, hopefully Luther Burden's okay with that end of game injury. I heard it's a quad injury, that it's not serious, but even if it's a 2-week injury at this point in the season, that's still serious because you're eating into playoff potential. But I don't feel really different about the Bears necessarily, despite the -1 here. It's just the defensive issues really were revealed. So I think 10's a good spot for Chicago, and their late game magic fell short this week, but there is something to be said about, like, as long as it's a close game, they are really good between the margins in those end of game situations, and their special teams is fantastic, by the way. But I've got the Houston Texans at number 9. They kind of let this game get away from them a little bit and almost blew it in the end. But it was an exact reminder of like what the script is for Houston. And it's easy to remember this second half as opposed to the first half, but the first half is exactly what you want for Houston. You want a couple of explosive plays, and CJ Stroud with these weapons that are fantastic can get you that, as long as you can scheme it up correctly and get the right protection on any given play, and then just have lights out defense allow you to win games 20-17 with championship caliber defense. So that's been the script for Houston, and in the grand sum, that's why they won this game, even though you wish you wish you had a little bit more, you could depend on the offense to put games away a little bit more. Because anytime, if you got to put the ball in the hands of a great quarterback, someone, like Justin Herbert or maybe a Drake May in the AFC or whoever it might be in the playoffs, as great as your defense is, you give a great quarterback enough chances, they can get you. But I like Houston quite a lot. Absolutely could see them coming out of the AFC with that defense and Stroud making enough plays. Then you have the Denver Broncos at number 8 here. They're going to fall down a couple spots. There was 1 week there when they beat Green Bay and Bo Nix played bar none the best game of his career where I was like, okay, I can see this being, one of the true Super Bowl frontrunners if they're able to keep that up. And it just hasn't been the case, right? They regress hard against Jacksonville. A pretty Broncos-esque game against the Chiefs where, yes, they won against Chris Oladokun, who had the ball at the end of the game to win it, right? Like, the defense has actually taken a step back. I think teams are realizing there's a couple weak spots in this defense with Alex Singleton. And, look, Talanoa Hufanga has been about what you expected from that signing, where you're going to get some spectacular splash plays from him, and they're going to get some plays where it's like, man, that was a 50-yard play that never needed to happen, or that back-breaking penalty just gave them a first down that didn't need to happen. There are plays where Talanoa Hufanga is a weakness for them. And I'm still not sure Riley Moss is a good corner. I'm curious where Broncos fans are at with Riley Moss. It's been a roller coaster season there, but they're still a good team, obviously, and they might get the 1 seed. So, they're a tough team to beat at home. They're a tough team to beat, generally speaking. They're going to muddy up the game and keep things close. And again, can I see them coming out of this year with a Super Bowl? Still, yes, but not quite as much as maybe a couple weeks ago when Bo Nix was cooking. I wish we could have seen a continuation of that, and it just hasn't happened. Number 7, the San Francisco 49ers. I'm back in on the Niners, man. And I know Niners fans have kind of gotten sick of me this year because I've really just had them basically in the 11 to 14 range probably this entire season. And I'm not really going to apologize for that because, out the gate you had just overwhelmed by injuries. They weren't that good to begin with. And then they were winning games with Mac Jones, and it's like, okay, what's the upside of this? And then they get Brock Purdy back and things are going well, but they weren't beating anybody, really. Their schedule was a joke at that time. So I'm not going to apologize for being too low on them. I think I was justified in where I had them, but also reacting to what we're seeing these last couple weeks, which is just different. It's just a different level against good opponents from the Niners here. And Brock Purdy playing, he's not an MVP candidate, obviously, but he's playing at an MVP level. He's playing at that tier 1 of quarterbacking right now. What he's doing the last 2 weeks, it's very challenging to find a better stretch of 2 games from a quarterback, and he's locked in, the way he's extending plays, playing within structure. Feels like every week you're going to get one turnover-worthy play with a throw over the middle of the field with him, but if every other drive you're efficient in the red zone and converting touchdowns and putting up 40 points, that's not going to be as big of a deal, obviously. They punted for the first time in a month against the Bears. It's just incredible what they're doing, and it's, Ricky Pearsall's been banged up, who looks great when he plays, by the way. If they can get him healthy in the playoffs, that's going to go a long way for them putting up 30-plus points in playoff matchups. But George Kittle wasn't available in this game, and it just hasn't really mattered. You've still got Jawan Jennings. You're getting impacts from Kendrick Bourne. The run game's fantastic. So I'm kind of back in on the Niners, and Niners fans will say, you can't say that, you were too low on them this year. Look, dude, I've gone to bat for this Niners team year in, year out for 4 years. I am consistently high on the Niners. So I'm not really buying that. Just kind of getting ahead of it there. Been doing this a long time. I know those comments are coming. But it's all in good fun either way. But let's go to our next team here, the Buffalo Bills. We're going to drop down 3 spots in the power rankings and drop out of that top tier. They are definitely the definition of a more flawed playoff team. This week was yet another frustrating week watching the Buffalo Bills. I tweeted it out. I was like, I'm sorry, Bills fans. I love you. You're genuinely one of my favorite fan bases out there. But I'm just so sick of this team. Like, the second you're ready to buy in, which again, this time it was when they beat the Patriots, the second you're ready to buy back in and say, oh man, like, look at this AFC playoff picture. None of the normal guys are there. Maybe it is going to be the Bills this year. They come out and get shut out in the first half against the Eagles and have an extremely frustrating performance. Yes, a really good Eagles team, right? We haven't revealed their ranking yet. Yet a very winnable game for the Bills in their own house, nonetheless. And man, this week the defense played well, though I think, as we'll talk about Philadelphia, some of it is self-inflicted wounds by the Eagles. But a defense that I've had a lot of questions about in Buffalo is starting to kind of click in some areas and play better. McDermott's done that pretty consistently. Like, I'm not the biggest McDermott fan, but he's at least a good defensive coach that can start to, figure some things out and put the defense in a better position heading into the playoffs, though that typically, the end of that story is usually a bad start, pretty good by the end of the year, and then once you get to the playoffs, they lose, giving up 30 points or whatever. That's kind of been part of the overall frustrations with Buffalo. But this week, like, back to the offensive issues after it felt like the offense was settling back down on this kind of little mini hot streak that they've been on. And Josh Allen just didn't play well. You definitely feel, again, the inability to get the ball downfield. Yes, they this week got a couple of deep completions, but they were tough contested catches. And over the middle of the field too, you're not really attacking the perimeter. No one has to really respect back shoulders and go balls and stacking corners on the outside. Just good traditional ways to win at the wide receiver position when you have a great quarterback like Josh Allen. But in this game, Josh Allen has had a couple of these moments this year where he's just not seeing the field as well. He was a little inaccurate in this game as well. I don't expect that to continue in the playoffs, but definitely a flawed team in Buffalo, to say the least, as they fall down 3 spots in the rankings here and into this tier. And then the Philadelphia Eagles. It's going to be a +2 for them. Good win. Great win, frankly, beating the Buffalo Bills and kind of one last final test before they head into the playoffs here. They got the Commanders again this week. I expect they take care of business and hope for a Lions win over Chicago to get the 2 seed, and they would host Green Bay. But this week still had, it's really 2 sides of the coin. I think the main reason I have them going up is not just beating the Buffalo Bills, but that defense really playing at that championship level. And it's big because you go back just a few weeks ago in the Bears game on Black Friday, right? So 3 weeks ago, we saw that defense kind of disinterested. We had some questions about the culture here in Philadelphia. Like, oh no, is this going to be the 2023 Eagles? Like, kind of a fork in the roads moment coming out of that Bears game. Like, where is this team going to land? And it's, at least on the defensive side of things, because that was part of the 2023 season, was the defense wasn't good either. Well, I mean, this game against Buffalo, you had that same exact feel of the Vic Fangio super defense, that true championship caliber defense last year, where so many of those games, it felt like it didn't even matter, like what Jalen Hurts and the offense did. I think the Super Bowl against the Chiefs and the Packers playoffs games last year especially, it was like, I mean, you only needed like 13 points realistically to win those games. That's literally what happened today, or on Sunday. But Jalen Carter going off, I think getting Nolan Smith in there, they were compressing the pocket like all throughout the D-line, not just on the interior. The secondary is incredible. We love these linebackers. I mean, it's incredibly difficult to beat this Eagles team with the defense playing like that. And then what we saw was the Eagles basically able to get away, barely, after the Bills failed on a 2-point conversion, but able to get away with what we saw a lot of last year, which is, okay, Jalen, play within yourself, hit those balls on the outside, use your legs when you have to, but we're going to run the ball on early downs, and if we end up in a 3rd and long, just, kind of make your first read, roll out. If something's there, make something happen. Otherwise, throw it away. We'll punt and play defense. And that was a big part of their success last year. That's what they did in this Bills game, and it was just enough to escape with a victory. thanks as well to their incredible special teams that has now for the second time won them games off of blocking field goals. This time it was a PAT that would have been the difference in this game because the Bills had to go or ended up going for 2 for the win. They would have just had to kick a PAT instead to win that game. Had Jalen Carter not blocked a PAT, you go back to when they played the Rams earlier this year, it was 2 blocked field goals that allowed them to come back. So they're playing up to their identity, and that just leaves to a team that is an incredibly tough out. I think they're a much closer team to like Denver and Houston, in regards to just sort of being that very difficult out. The offense and Hurts wasn't specifically bad in this game. I actually thought he played really well in the first half, and then they just didn't ask him to play well in the second half. But the entire Eagles offensive machine, that's where the flaw comes in. It's been the narrative on this team all year long, whether it's Hurts playing bad in one game or play calling being an issue in another game, or the whole idea that they're not running the ball quite as well at all. It all packages together for sure. But it's still a +2 for the Eagles here as they look to be getting hot and healthy as they approach the playoffs. But let's go to my top tier and Jags fans. Here we go. This is what Jags fans have been asking for and have been mad at me over the last couple of power rankings for me not giving them enough credit, which is bullshit, by the way, Jags fans, because I made one feature video on a team this year. And who did I make it on? The Jacksonville Jaguars. And I was talking about how they're legit, everything's coming together, how I just need to see a little bit more consistency from the passing game, and like this can be a Super Bowl team. And then they struggle in the middle of the year, right after I make that video, classic TFG curse. And then, they get Jacoby Myers and Trevor starts this hot streak against teams like the Titans and the Jets. And I started raising the Jags and saying I'm excited. Yet so many comments are like, you're such a Jags hater. Like, they're so much better than you're giving them credit for. And I'm like, can I just see them throw the ball against a good defense before we get there, please? And they go and do that against Denver last week. And unfortunately for Jags fans, I was out of town, wasn't able to do the power rankings last week, but that was incredible, man. And I'm so excited to see what this team can do in the playoffs moving forward, because that was the one missing piece. And it was so obvious earlier in the year, whether it was miscommunications or drops or inaccuracy from Trevor Lawrence, it's all come together. And it's easy to forget that this is the first year of this Liam Cohen offense. Like, it was reasonable to give them a little bit of time to settle this thing in. And Trevor Lawrence had been reworking his footwork with the new coaching staff. Reasonable to give that a little bit of time to see if the accuracy could improve. And it all has come together. The Liam Cohen hire looks, slam dunk, grand slam, like you name it. It's a shame that he's probably not going to win Coach of the Year, because any given year he's absolutely a Coach of the Year favorite. It's just a crazy year for that this year. But yeah, I think at this point we've seen enough, and it's not like it was the most dominant game against the Colts this week, but they took care of business, and I thought Trevor played well. And with this team settling in with the passing game being that one kind of critical flaw, now the last 5 weeks, Trevor Lawrence, the number 2 graded quarterback per PFF for the last 5 weeks. He got 14 big-time throws to 2 turnover-worthy plays. He's using his legs as well. I love that they've really mixed in read options, and he's scrambling as well on top of it, making plays outside the pocket. Just got to love it, man. With that coming together, I'm ready to put the Jags in this top tier, which are, there's really no clear Super Bowl frontrunner this year, especially with the Rams looking like they're not going to get home field advantage. You're talking about which teams really don't have a fatal flaw and which teams kind of do, that make them a little more matchup dependent. There's not really anything with the Jags from a matchup perspective that you can exploit. And that's kind of the critical difference here and why they find themselves in this top tier. But at number 3, the New England Patriots climbing up a spot here. I think you can make an argument for Patriots Jags as well. Both these teams are like the surprise darlings of the AFC, and both of these teams likewise have come together from being, not bad teams heading into the year, but certainly questionable and young teams with new staffs. But they've really just kind of put it all together. And in the Patriots case, this is projecting forward a little bit too as well, because it looks like Milton Williams and Will Campbell will be back for the playoffs. And hell, they got a chance at the 1 seed as well, which would be really exciting for them. But even if it's the 2 seed, that's great. But they've continued to just be on a roll. Granted, they did lose to the Bills, but it was also a game like that got away from them. Like, it's not like they played bad against the Bills, right? They got up to a 21-0 lead and just kind of had some inexperience down the stretch. They fall just short, but they're still playing great ball, and it's, you know, I was really worried when Will Campbell goes down, what the protection was going to look like, and if Drake May was going to have a drop-off in play, and it just hasn't happened. And Milton Williams being their, you know, I would say second most impactful defender, but a big impact for that defense. Definitely their best pass rusher. He's been out, and they've continued to play well. I mean, they could have beaten the Jets by 60 points in this game if they wanted to, but they smartly took starters out in the second half. So Patriots are rolling. Then you got the Seahawks at number 2. I do still have some issues with their offensive consistency, and you could actually argue that they should be in that more flawed playoff teams category. And, you know, maybe I'm talking out of two sides of my mouth here, but it's hard to like perfectly land these teams. The Seahawks are clearly the second best team in football to me, like whatever way you want to slice it, even if Sam Darnold can be turnover worthy prone, and their offensive line can contribute to that as well. They've shown some issues there, and it certainly wasn't the most dominant performance against the Seahawks. But look, when their defense is so elite, like genuinely elite, so complete as well, not just elite, from pass rush to forcing turnovers and coverage, you name it, man. They're just so impressive that even if you get a couple Sam Darnold turnovers, it honestly just doesn't matter, because a couple turnovers aren't going to stop you from still finding your way to 21, 24 points. I love what Seattle's doing right now, man. And they got a chance to get that 1 seed and force the NFC to go through the 12, the 12s there in Seattle. It's a big deal. But I do still view the Rams as the best team in football. Despite that, Seahawks win in that crazy Thursday night game. Rams might not quite have what the Seahawks have defensively, but they are a good step ahead of Seattle from an offensive perspective. And, hopefully Devontae can get back fully healthy with that hamstring for the playoffs. It's something to keep an eye on. I mean, hamstrings are tough and can reoccur at any given moment. So that's really the one concern, because I do think Devontae is their man-to-man answer. He provides not just that, but so much within this scheme with the digs, and just another guy that you have to worry about other than Puka. It's a big deal to have that, as amazing as Puka has been. I mean, Puka is a huge reason the Rams are number 1 here, but I do view the Rams as the best overall, most complete team in the league. Outside of being like a lighter front, and like maybe you can run the ball if you have a great run game, and they'll be tested tonight against Atlanta and Bijan. Outside of that being just kind of an average run defense, it's not even a weakness. They're the most complete team to me. So Seahawks fans don't like it, but I do still view them as the best team. But it's not so certain that they're like Super Bowl favorites or like in a tier of their own or anything like that, especially with Seattle beating them last week, and the fact that the Rams aren't going to have home field advantage, most likely. So there are your Week 18 NFL Power Rankings. I probably won't have a Power Rankings video next week, because I will be doing my playoff predictions show at this time next week. But I might still make some power rankings, and maybe I'll include them in that video, just because I know you guys love the power rankings and want to see them every week. I certainly will tweet them out as well. So they will exist. The analysis will be focused on the playoffs, and obviously a different focus as we shift to playoffs after this week. I just want to thank you guys for watching, whether this was the first power rankings you've seen on the channel, or you stuck with me week after week here. It's been a really riveting season, and we're not done yet. It's going to be a crazy playoff season, and then we're starting to trickle into draft season here, man. Got a couple write-ups on these wide receivers done now, and starting to shift some of my focus there as well. So lots more to come. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any of it. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you later. Cheers.